Our next speaker. The subject is better finance, converging nature with technology and capital markets. So that's an interesting topic. I spoke to him a little bit about the subject matter. Many of us are familiar with Bitcoin. It's something that's not too new anymore. Before Bitcoin, there's plenty of other digital currencies. And so our next speaker is going to talk to you a little bit about that and how it overlays into the subject matter we're all here to discuss today. So I'm going to go ahead and bring up Stan Stalnaker from Hub Culture, and I'll let him tell you more about what he's doing. Thank you very much, Stan.
Great. Thank you. Thanks. Hi, everybody. Great to see you. We put hand in the air. It's like 3 o'clock. We need a little coffee. I'm really glad to be here. I came from London last night, so follow. That's because I'm jet lagged. Chip, thank you very much for having us in about what we're about to talk about, which is this kind of idea of digital currency, technology, and how they can be used to drive environmental consequences. And this is really what we've been doing with our project, which is a digital currency called VEN. So a little bit of background. VEN was founded in 2007, and it's a currency that is asset-backed. So that means that there are underlying things that are effectively backing up the currency. This is different from what was just mentioned with Bitcoin, which is a decentralized asset that exists on the web, but the price of that is only really based on supply and demand. So if a lot of people want it, the price goes up, and there's a limited supply. VEN is very different from that because it has basically a community around it, and that community manages the currency. So this is actually how we started, is with a community. Back in 2002, Hub Culture was a book that I wrote when I used to be in the marketing world, looking at globalization. And it was really a book about the people who are living between the world's big hubs, the big cities. And when that book came out, we started a website that became one of the first social networks called Hub Culture. And this community of people were gathering, and we were doing things all around the world. It could be a fundraiser in Venice, or a co-working space in Beijing, or a party in London. And we discovered very quickly that if you're a small company, but you're doing things everywhere in the world, it's very difficult to manage that financially. You couldn't just go open a bank account in Ho Chi Minh City and expect to operate for a week and then leave and go do something else. So we realized really very quickly that the idea of a digital currency could be very useful for us. So we invented our own currency, and the currency was called VEN. And VEN launched in 2007, and when it first began, it was really an experiment. We didn't know quite what to do with it or what it would become, but very quickly it evolved into really an asset that could be traded among the members of the community. So they could buy some VEN, and then they could go shopping at our real estate or our stores, or they could send it to a friend, either over email or via another method like SMS. And as time went on, we really discovered that we had invented really a currency, and it had a community, but we started to think about how we could actually make it better, how we could make it socially progressive. And the idea came to basically back the currency with assets. So when I say an asset-backed currency, what VEN has become today is really the world's most liquid currency. It can go to any email address and any SMS phone in the world with zero transaction cost. And not only that, it actually transmits electronically instantly. It takes us about half a second to clear a payment, and I can punch in an amount and a contact, and I can send a VEN or 100 VEN or 10 million VEN to somebody in Tokyo or Rwanda or Brazil. But what's pretty cool about it was we said, if we're going to asset back this, originally it was 10 VEN to the dollar, so 10 points kind of, a little bit like a Facebook credit or like Amex rewards. But we started thinking about if it's really going to be global, we should maybe diversify this and make it a little bit euro and a little bit dollar and a little bit like, renminbi. And then we started thinking, well, if we're going to put currencies in, if we added commodities to this underlying basket, we could offset inflation. Because generally as inflation goes up, currency values go down, right? So this is why gold was worth $5 in 1905 and today is worth $1,500. So we decided to put commodities into that. And when we did that, we actually had this kind of light bulb moment where we said, well, what if we actually put carbon into the underlying basket of the currency? So by putting carbon into the underlying basket, we could actually create an engine for environmental protection just by the use of the currency. And so that's kind of what we have today. So here you have this kind of fun pie chart, which looks at the basic elements that make up a VEN. And so a VEN is largely fiat currencies, big ones like the dollar and the euro and the yen and the renminbi. But if you look at that little, all the way, you go around to some smaller currencies, you get to carbon. And basically, 7% of the value of a VEN is carbon. And so what we do is we take that value and we invest into carbon-related assets as part of the underlying float of the currency. So if, for instance, you give us $100, we give you about 1,000 VEN. And then, if I'm doing my math right, we'll take about 70 of the VEN, or sorry, 70 of the dollars, about 700 of the VEN is actually put into environmental assets. So when you think about scaling this up into the financial markets, it becomes really exciting because you have this float of currency that's sitting there, which can be invested into environmental assets, and that float is pretty much permanent. It can actually be invested into longer term environmental assets before the currency liquidates back out into another asset. So when you think about commodity trading or manufacturing or even financial market trading, this becomes really powerful because it gives you basically a fund for environmental investment. So one of the interesting things about the currency is that when we went and started talking to hedge funds and banks and even central banks about what we created, they said, okay, you know, this environmental thing is really nice, but carbon is really volatile and it's really kind of unreliable. And quite frankly, we don't care because what we want as a trader or as a bank are two things. Either volatility, because volatility drives profits when you're trading, or stability. Stability is very good if you're a producer. So if you're a farmer in Kenya or if you're Toyota, you're producing an asset and you're selling it. And you want the most stable price you can have for that asset so that you can plan, you know, the pricing of the asset or the rest of the things around your business. But the financial markets don't really like that. So there's this kind of inherent conflict between producers, the people who do all the work and make all the good things, and traders who basically make money off of us doing all that work. And so we found that there was less demand for VEN than we would have liked, especially when you compare it to something like Bitcoin, where it started at 5 cents and went as high as $1,500 and then is now at around 700. Lots of volatility, lots of opportunity to make money as a trader. But as a producer, VEN is amazing. So if you look at these volatility charts here, this is actually going all the way back to 2009, and VEN is the green chart. And that's against the dollar. So you notice that the blue is higher, right? And then it's lower. And that basically means that the dollar against other assets is moving more than the VEN is. So the VEN for the last 9 years has been more stable than the US dollar. And then if you look at this kind of correlation, basically against the dollar and against other currencies, the longer you go, the stronger the correlation gets towards stability. So this was a hedge fund that did this analysis, and they said, wow, this is actually pretty interesting, because if you buy VEN and you hold VEN, you get all the benefits of holding a bunch of different foreign currencies without the volatility. So as a hedge, it's incredibly valuable. It's actually the most stable currency on the planet today. So specifically for this audience, I'm really happy to be here because I can talk about the thing that gets me most excited about VEN, the thing that is really the driving energy behind why we're doing what we're doing, which is environmental protection. How do we actually drive environmental protection using this digital currency that a few people around the world are using? Well, what we're doing is we're taking that 7% that's in the float and we're investing into carbon-related assets. So we did a deal with Nike and the London carbon market a few years ago that put 250,000 Amazon trees under protection in the Amazon. And we've just completed our first purchase of forest, actually a small, 100 acres. It's nothing, but it's actually fundamentally important. But we've actually, instead of just doing the carbon credit purchases to protect the land, we're actually now starting to buy the land to protect the forests. And this is something that we think is really exciting because it creates an entirely new model for financial protection of environmental resources. So we did this project in North Carolina for a specific reason. There are some hedge funds and investment funds that work in that area, and they said to us, we've been trying to figure out how you could restore all those like mountaintops in Appalachia that have been destroyed by coal mining. But there's no economic incentive to go in and actually do the restoration and plant the trees that would restore those ecosystems. But if you're actually buying that land and planting those trees, and then you're holding that in the basket of the currency as an environmental asset, there's suddenly an environmental and an economic reason for doing environmental restoration and forest afforestation, not only in Appalachia, but all around the world. That's why we bought first in North Carolina. And our hope is, and our request to you, if you're investing, think about helping us use VEN to drive those types of environmental protection. You get a financial return, it's very stable, and it has a very, very positive impact on climate. So just a couple like kind of sum up points about VEN. Again, established in 2007, it's asset backed, it's pretty secure, knock on wood, we haven't had a hack yet. And we're really working now on driving this into the financial system. So in 2014, we became the first digital currency to start trading in the financial markets. And we went from doing 50 million VEN, about 5 million a year, to 500 million, about 50 million, on just one exchange in a matter of months. And then since then, we've had to pause that because the Treasury Department was like, well, we're not sure if we really want to see non-national currencies trading in the financial markets without the banks doing it themselves. But the Treasury Department and the Federal Reserve have given us the basic thumbs up for trading as long as it's happening with accredited institutions, banks, and hedge funds. So we're working on this idea of a kind of two-prong approach. So one prong is institutional, so going to hedge funds, investors, banks, and saying, we're going to hand you the tools to be able to use VEN and trade it yourselves, and to trade it among yourselves as a regulated institution. And then on the other side, we're going with some of our partners to the far end of the system to create what we call a vast closed loop. And so this is an example of an app that is about to launch in just a few weeks, and it allows you to make a VEN transaction to anyone else just off of an app. So that's pretty cool. But we worked with the Gates Foundation to think about how this could be relative for or related to financial inclusion. And so we've also been working on making it available for SMS. So this is the only financial system in the world that allows you to basically send a text with a request to any other phone number and make a financial transfer at the same time. So this is important in places like Africa and India, where people don't necessarily have a smartphone. A lot of people do now, but obviously a lot of people don't. So if you just have a mobile network, if you just have access to a dumb brick phone, you can now make a financial transaction with zero cost between one user and another user. So we're taking the kind of low end and the mass closed loop, and we're looking for partners like you guys to help us drive it into the institutional side of the financial markets. So we really think that this has great potential. Last year, we announced a new project called VEN Loop. And so this is really a private network for institutional settlement. And it's focused on banks and hedge funds and other accredited investors. And what it does is give you a private VEN account at the institutional level, and it hooks you in to other institutional traders who are able to hold large amounts of VEN and trade it between each other. So this really is very interesting for banks who are looking at trade finance or other ways to drive financial transactions just in their own kind of club. So if you're a bank or a fund and you're holding a large amount of one currency and you want to move it into another currency, you can trade in that closed institutional loop and save a lot. So if you think about the amount of time that correspondent banking takes, like I don't know if you guys know what correspondent banking is, but that's when you have to go online and you pay $20 every time you want to make a transaction to somebody, and you put in your SWIFT code or your IBAN number, and it goes to 4 banks before it finally gets to the bank that holds the account of the person that you're sending money to. All that is called correspondent banking. And digital currencies at large are driving the extinction of correspondent banking, because they're going to enable people to move assets, not just bank to bank or company to company, but peer to peer. And so that's our vision. And we think, well, we know that this is going to be huge, not only for the movement of non-fiat currency between people, between companies, and between institutions, but very soon between bots. So it's crazy what the the kind of projections are for bot-to-bot trading. But by 2020, we think that there'll be a $5 trillion market for machines to trade value to other machines, where humans, corporations, and even like institutions are not the primary driver of the value. And so bot-to-bot trades are going to be a big market, and they're not really designed for fiat currency. They're really designed for machine-based currencies like Ven. So that's what I would leave you with. A little taste of the future. We traded 500 million last year. Our goal is to get to 2 billion by 2017. But quite frankly, we could be doing $1 billion a day in Ven trades. And that would create a very, very large fund for environmental protection. So thank you.